And welcome back to the second hour of the Conservative Voice on WWDB AM 860 in Philadelphia. This is your host, Gary Heasley, and I'm joined in the studio by Felice Fine once again. Felice, welcome.
My pleasure.
Back for the second hour. And today we have Bunny Welsh with us. For those that were here for the first hour, you got to hear her Arctic frost tale, which is just wild. But Bunny, thanks for joining us today.
That should be the name of the book, The Arctic Frost Tale.
Yes, it should. I mean, just a wild story. Now, for those that were looking at our flyer, we had scheduled Emerald Robinson to be on this second hour, but it turns out she's not feeling well today. So we are really lucky that we have some folks that will help us when we're in a pinch. And so given everything that happened on Tuesday, given what's been going on with the country and this sort of soul searching that's happening now among conservatives and Republicans and this community, we were lucky to get Mark Mitchell to join us once again. Mark, welcome back to the Conservative Voice on WWDB AM 860.
Yeah, great to be back. You know, I took a half-hour break from Twitter just to come on. Literally around the clock. Yeah.
You know, first of all, you're on fire on Twitter. Your tweets are simple and clear. Crystal clear. Absolutely on. Now, I at times, you know, we take an attempt at sarcasm. Sometimes it works and doesn't on Twitter. I think last night we missed one and we hit one. So, but your messaging, you know, that first of all, the discussions we've had on this show, right, with you about what's going on in the zeitgeist, what's happening with this voter base. And now you look at what happened Tuesday, you know, to me it seems like these tie together nicely. What is your view of what happened Tuesday?
The biggest thing is that Republicans are terrible. Like, that's the takeaway. The party needs to be burned to the ground and replaced with something different. And I don't mean a third party. I mean brutal accountability to toe the America First Party line. But they're all bought and paid for, and they've shown us who they are. And I want to, really underscore how absolutely horrifying this is, because you look back at 2016, and Trump, what did he get, 62, 63 million votes, something like that?
Yeah.
Well, I would say, looking at those, probably 50 million of them were okay, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I get this guy, I support him. A lot of them were yeah, well, he's a Republican. And a lot of them were oh, my word, Hillary Clinton is horrifying. Mm-hmm. So he came and he governed. It was a little chaotic. I think he convinced some people, they kind of got it, right? And then I think a lot of people were mad about the way that they went after him with impeachments.
Yep.
He increased his voter base a lot, but then he didn't get to govern. And then I think a lot of people watched him during the Biden administration, and they said, "Oh, this is terrible. We need him back." And they voted for him specifically, and they gave Republicans a chance. A lot of these people were not Republicans. So he got up to 77, 78 million.
Mm-hmm. He
really increased his turnout. And in my polling, I don't think you can trust the exit polling. In my polling, 42% of his support was from independents and Democrats.
Yes.
And a lot of it was first-time voters. So these are people that might not have been paying attention in 2016, or they were never really sold on the Republican Party. And they were like, oh, my God, they shut down businesses. They wanted to force a vaccine on me. They literally tried to raid Mar-a-Lago. They destroyed the entire economy. Jobs are going to foreign-born workers. It was existential.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were screaming, I think, for action from Republicans. They literally weaponized the government against patriotic Americans. And what do we see? Well, Donald Trump comes in, and what would I grade him? A B minus. He needs to do better at messaging.
Mm-hmm.
He's been chaotic. He hasn't been focused on domestic policy. What have the Republicans done? They completely failed. This is triple F minus kind of fiddling while America burns. And, the window's closing. It was the most obvious thing in the world that they had to cement the sale. They had to close, and they have not closed. This last string of a week has been the biggest comedy of errors with this shutdown. It's I was screaming for them to use the shutdown, but the whole point was to use it as leverage over the Democrats and give them pain.
Right.
They didn't do that at all. They literally handed all the leverage to Democrats, and America was given Trump a chance. His numbers didn't really plunge yet for 2 or 3 weeks in the shutdown. I think they were waiting to see what Republicans would do. And what did Republicans do? No messaging, no action, No, nothing other than, try and blame it on the Democrats. Well, you're going to lose that fight when SNAP goes away.
Yep.
And then people will go on the internet, and I don't think any Republican, all these guys are boomers. I don't think any Republicans spend any time at all on the internet except for maybe like 3 of them, and they don't understand how the last 2 weeks has been like a mud wrestling match as BoomerCons, Ziocons try to purify, like mentally purify the party. It's disgusting. And all it's done is show what the Republican Party really cares about, which is everybody but the voter. And so independents and Democrat crossovers just didn't show up. You look at New Jersey, Chitterelli got 1.4 million votes. Okay, that's good. He increased 100,000 from 2021. Well, he only got 70% of Trump's turnout. Mikey Sherrill got 90%. So the Democrats turned out, and I think there was a little bit of cheating there, but he got destroyed.
Of Trump's turnout. I mean, say that again, please.
Yeah, Chitterelli got 70% of Trump's 2024 turnout.
Mm-hmm.
So just a year ago, Trump got 2 million New Jersey votes.
Mm-hmm.
And all these young independents, they just didn't come out. They didn't see a reason to vote for Republicans. And this is the problem, is that the Republican Party is so morally and intellectually bankrupt that they will look for any bit of good news in order to try and grift off of it. Oh, look at the kids. They're moving farther to the right. Oh, look, the country's becoming more Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look, Johnny Appleseed registering everybody for us. Well, no. You have to give people a reason to vote for you, especially now when everybody is absolutely freaking out about the state of the country. And so this was a rebuke of Republicans, in my opinion. And, of course, a lot of Republicans did turn out. You know, like they did register people in New Jersey, but it's still a Democrat plus 10 state, and they ran a traditional Republican. What do you think was going to happen?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think they had any idea what was going to happen. I think, and I don't know this, but I think that this Republican establishment specifically and the broader Republican community as a whole are still thinking, you know, you spoke earlier about brand loyalty.
Right.
And that is a factor, certainly a stronger factor for Democrats. But they thought the Trump voter had brand loyalty to the Republican brand.
Which they do not.
It was to Trump.
Right. And so and he ran a campaign, as we talked about in the first half hour, that was so completely different than anything Republicans typically do.
Yeah.
They don't even understand what he did. You know, so they're running around, like I said, and Mark, you know, I know you know this, but the single-funded issue in Pennsylvania is driving people to vote by mail. That's what they think is the holy grail. If they just change the way people vote, somehow, magically, they're going to win. So the messaging isn't there. You know, great candidates. We had great candidates in 22, 23, and 24, and they're getting wiped out. And and so the excuse that's given, first off, is, well, we've got a defective voter. You know, this voter just isn't doing the job. They aren't coming when we need them. Are the voters defective, Mark?
No. The voters are the customer. And if they don't vote for you, then you gave them the wrong product. It's as simple
or no
as
product.
That. Yeah, or no product. Exactly, no product. It's defective. What's their answer to blue state liberalism? They don't have a contract at all. And I see it. I mean, I guess Chitterelli is better than what's happening in a lot of states, but you look at like places like Minnesota, Colorado. I've polled these states, and people hate the Republican Party, but they want a MAGA Republican more than they want a traditional Republican.
Absolutely.
The Republican establishment pretends these states don't exist, and the people in the state run horrible people that are like basically global homo slop, and they lose. But what the problem is that, okay, you could have run a better candidate in New Jersey, right? A real true MAGA America First guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they would have done a lot better, even though, we still have the national picture. Like, that's a real problem. Like that, I can't convey enough my disdain for what the traditional Republicans in Washington, D.C., they literally lit this election on fire. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, though, in New Jersey, that MAGA candidate probably still would have lost. But what you do, you're still explaining the platform to people and convincing them that your product is effective. It's a sales process, and Republicans are not salesmen at all. They're failing at it. It's ridiculous. And they're literally out there trying to sell their product to everybody else, other parts of the world, big business, corporations. I don't really know what happens behind the scenes, but I've been talking to some Bill Spadilla guys, and he was trying to get the Trump endorsement, and he got shut out apparently by somebody within the White House,
Mm-hmm.
and Chitterelli ran, and I think a lot of it probably has something to do with Chitterelli's ties to big pharma in the state. Like, tell me another reason, because these guys don't know. Because Spadilla, I think, was a lot more authentically MAGA than Chitterelli was. So I just don't understand how those things happen and how they expect to stay a relevant party. The youth story tells, in my opinion, like that there's an existential crisis coming for the Republican Party, because what was wild is that the youth never, ever, ever vote Republican, and it was like basically tied in my polling just a year ago.
Yep.
But what was wild is that youth approval of Trump, voters under 40, got up to 60%, which should have been like, if you're going to sell somebody to something and they're like, oh, I really like that feature, give me more of that. You're like, okay, this is in. I'm closing right now. Closing. You know when that was? That was exactly to the week, the same time in February where Doge search volume was the highest on Google Trends.
Yep.
These kids were watching Doge hack apart the government, and they said, you know what? It is as bad as I thought it was. Finally, the Republicans are fixing the federal government. Now, 18 to 29-year-old Trump approval is 35%. 35%. They completely turned on Trump. And what was it? Bombing Iran, Epstein, 3,000-page, one big beautiful bill, no legislation, government shutdown, the freak out over Israel going on in the Republican Party, and the way that even still now, with the government shutdown, you have people like John Cornyn out there putting out bills for Israel. Americans literally don't look at the Republican Party and see it as a valid alternative anymore. And so what you have is, I think, 2024. 2016, I think Trump was like a cult of personality and a referendum on the Clintons, right? Like dynasty politics. I think 2024 was a referendum on institutional trust.
Mm-hmm.
I think 2028 is shaping up to be a referendum on capitalism. And that's really scary because the youth are going increasingly towards socialism. And I can't really blame them. They're being led by essentially boomers who had the cream of the crop of America. They literally strip-mined it and handed these kids a broken society. And they're still trying to tone police them and punch down and tell them to go away. They're not at all looking at the way the winds are blowing. I hate to sound like a revolutionary, but this is how you get them.
But so I mean, just that description or that explanation tied in with what we said in the first 30 minutes, right? The first segment of our show today. Now, one other thing, what you're saying is a total surprise to you? You only learned after the election, or did you have some hint beforehand?
Well, yeah. I mean, I pulled the New Jersey race a week into October, so the shutdown had barely stuck yet, and Trump's numbers hadn't really started to dump. And his numbers didn't really dump that bad. Like the real lesson here is congressional ratings. That's the poll that tipped me off. So I had Jack down 6 points again at the beginning of the shutdown, right? And since then, we had Donald Trump tank to -8 net approval. We had a poll about Congress come back that showed that independence ratings of Congress was 3% excellent and 6% good, and the rest was all fair or poor, mostly poor. So that's like raging mad.
Yep.
Independents despised Congress. And then we had independent approval of Trump get down to -27, literally on Independence Day, on Election Day. Unbelievably bad numbers. It's everything led to the numbers tanking right before Election Day. It was literally just exasperation and rebellion.
So if you go back to the 23-4 cycle, right, that building up to Trump winning, I always go back to this one point where we did a town hall on January 11 of 2024, and we put up a headline that says the youth are moving away from the Democrats. They're losing their control of the youth. And we watched your polling very, very closely through 24, and we used it in every single town hall, every discussion we had. We had Rasmussen up there, and we were watching this stuff, and a couple of others, like the poll on trust in corporate media that somebody does. And that's a really good poll. Goes back like decades, so you really see trend lines. So we were watching all this, and we could see the Trump win building. We could see it. We talked about it. We pointed it out. And after the election, people said, how did you know? We said, well, I got to tell you, we cheated. We looked at what Mark Mitchell was saying, so we had a little ace up our sleeves. But we could see that coming. And then, when you began to join us on the show and talk about this stuff, we could see all of this stuff playing out. And if you go back and look over the last 90 days, you can see the build toward this loss coming. It was being talked about, and it started with the Epstein thing. And when that message started going out and you started saying, wait a minute, people, these numbers are shattering. There is a problem with the numbers. You were attacked as, I can't remember the word, a doomer. That's it. You were attacked as a doomer.
Oh, yeah, I'm black-pilling, and I'm a panicking, they said. A lot of people said panicking.
Yes.
Let me, there's a little bit more to this story you don't know. So Epstein, people play a lot of fast and loose with him during the campaign. It's a really easy promise to make. And is it the biggest issue? No. But when you come out in the way that Pam Bondi came out, you make it like a canary in the coal mine about accountability. So this comes after 6 months of her doing nothing. And so this is the first big opportunity, the first big topic. And they come out and they say nothing to see here. And that's a slap in the face of all the independent voters who hate the two-tiered system of justice, that voted for Donald Trump and Republicans not because of brand loyalty, but because they want the system fixed and they just want anybody to do something. And so I said, this is terrible. It's going to cause everybody to freak out. So we immediately went into the field with a poll, the same day. And we came back and we found that, only 16% of America agrees with Pam Bondi that the case is closed. That morning, I sent the crosstabs in. I know for a fact that they landed on Donald Trump's desk. Mm-hmm. You know what he did a few hours later? He came out and attacked his followers. That is unbelievable.
Wow. Oh, this is when he came out and said something like, why are we still talking about...
Yeah, if you're going to follow me, I forget exactly what he said, but he attacked his followers as he said, I'm not stupid or something. He implied something like that, that people that believe this stuff. And it was bad. I forget the exact quote. And you know what? I get it. He's a human. He's allowed to be mad. But you can't brute force public opinion. He's doing that today. He's making the very same exact mistakes just today. Yesterday, I think he was doing a press conference and somebody was talking about the affordability crisis.
Yep.
And he goes, I don't want to hear about affordability. Look at all the things we're doing with trade. Well, it's okay, you're jet-setting around and making deals with all these countries, but there's been nothing that's happened in here. We've had a week of horrible economic news, and this sounds exactly like what Biden did. And Bidenomics is great. Don't believe your lying eyes. You can't gaslight Americans about their everyday experience, especially when, looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People are concerned about security, you know, the ability to live. That's where we're at.
All right.
And so, yeah.
So when you take all of that now and you look at Mamdani winning in New York, should we be shocked?
No, this is what the youth want. Even the ones that voted for Trump under 40 overwhelmingly have socialistic views. We don't have to go into all the polling. People can look on our website, just search socialism. It was maybe back in the middle of September. But just to give you an idea, almost 60% of Trump voters under 40 support excess wealth confiscation. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're at. And even the ones who voted for Trump are split 43-43 on whether they would vote for a Democratic socialist. So what we're really looking at is the fourth turning where, again, the boomers have led everything. We've had they didn't build it. The silence and the GIs built the system. But they were really invested in this system of morals and values, very idealistic, even as through selfishness and self-interest, they rode all of these institutions into the ground, dined on the feast of globalism and offshoring and the retail stock market and building the world's most expensive healthcare system that is now a transfer payment from the youth to the olds.
Yep.
And what they're starting to realize, I think the reason they're freaking out so much is because what happens is, there wasn't a lot of difference between the youngs and the olds on most issues. There was just a disagreement on what party would fix it. Mm-hmm. And now that's kind of shifted to where there's huge disagreement between the youngs and the olds on issues. And the biggest one to pop up was Israel. They are completely at odds. And so you have this fight on the internet that the young people are winning about whether we should put other countries' interests ahead of our own. And this isn't a statement on Israel. This is a look at boomers' intransigence on this issue because they will not cede any territory. It's a values thing for them. But the youth don't have this value at all.
Right.
And I think you're going to see this conflict play out increasingly over other things. It's going to get worse and worse. I think we can expect soon maybe that these kind of feelings are going to flip on things like NATO. That would be a big problem.
Oh, that's coming.
Yeah. It's going to flip on social safety nets. It's getting really dark out there. I had one of these groypers and, post on my feed. And they say on the internet, they call it the day of the pillow. And that's the day where the young voters all of a sudden realize that they can seek revenge on the boomers and basically pull the plug on all of their health care and social safety nets. This is
the day of the pillow.
The day of the pillow. That's pretty dark. That's a little on the dark side.
That is dark.
But there's no easy answers, and this is existential stuff. This is the end of the fourth turning. And it's like, okay, well, if you think I'm being histrionic, just look at the debt clock, right? We're paying $1 trillion in interest, and what happens when we get downgraded another, rating or two?
That's
what
right.
happens then?
Well, I was talking to some boomers about healthcare on another platform a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying, listen, this Medicare thing is really inexpensive. This is great. We should all get on that. But the truth is that healthcare is getting to be too expensive. Deductibles are getting too high. The government's just going to have to give us more. And I said, great. That's not a problem. The government give you whatever you want. Here's what you've got to do. You've got to come up with $2.5 trillion to fund the deficit that you've already created. You have to hand over all of your savings, 401ks, and pensions to the government to cover the $40 trillion bill you ran up.
Yeah.
And then you have to find another $1 trillion to pay for your health care dreams. There's just this delusional thing amongst a certain cohort, a huge part of the boomers outside of this sort of MAGA group.
Yeah, I'm not saying everybody. Broad brushes here.
No, but this is really a dominant view that they deserve, that they should get. And they say things like, I'm a conservative, but I think the government should pay the rest of the cost of health care. And when you point out that, wait a minute, the United States spends 2 times the average of developed nations in health care. We're at a little over like $14,500 per capita. Mm-hmm. They're at half that, right? The developed nations. I mean, the only one that's close is Switzerland, and they're $5,000 per capita less than us. And so you say, what could the problem be? We're spending too much. They don't want to hear any of that. They don't. No, I don't want to have to fix it.
It's the same thing with education.
Yeah, I made a tweet that people said was really dark, and it's like, you just imagine like the boomer on their 57th round of like vaccine turbo cancer chemo at $100,000 a month, like basically telling the Zoomers, how things are going to be.
Right.
Like the healthcare is a wealth transfer from healthy and young working individuals, and we spend, like, I don't know what the odds are, but I suspect that we'll find that we spend a lot of our medical money just on sort of like, chronic care in the last 2 years of somebody's life, on average, increasingly, and that's where most of our technology has gone into. And why is that? Well, it's because it's super easy to get a Medicare billing code.
Right.
And
that's
so
exactly
we went from 3% of GDP when Medicare and Medicaid was put in place. We went from 3% of GDP, healthcare being like 19% now, and like half of that is government taxpayer funded. And so the problem is, though, like, that's hard to unpack without addressing the fact that we have so many people employed in that industry. It's one of the biggest employers in almost every state now. But it has to be unpacked immediately, or we're dead. And we have all of the right people in place to do it, and I haven't heard a single thing.
So
as far as I'm concerned, pharma is not at all sweating any bullets about accountability over COVID, at the very least. I can tell you that. Let alone any pressure about, like, aggressively rolling back the way. I mean, you know what happens. You get into the hospital and they're like, well, we got to run this test. Oh, we got to run this test. Oh, we're going to put you on this super expensive drug that has a very small signal, but it's the only thing we have. So we have a code for it, so we're going to use it. I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff like that. Let alone all the things that Doge was telling us was probably fraudulent going on in there. But, of course, the Republicans got rid of Doge.
Exactly.
Which is the best gift they had ever been given, was Elon Musk. So it's a mess. And, like, I don't know. I think if you don't fix this, maybe not this cycle, but the youth are going to be socialists, because New York City was very happy with Mamdani. Now,
Absolutely.
I don't know if he'll last or be effective, but, the very, very best advice I can give the Trump administration is like, leave that guy alone.
Yes.
Do not give him something to resist against. Let him try and mess up, and hope he does. Maybe try and steal some of the corporate headquarters out of New York City. But,
yeah, give him enough rope to hang New York, and he'll hang it. And
yeah.
And so there are two quick points. You know, you talk about the boomer-zoomer battle, right? And when you tell them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and then you use H-1B visas and mass migration and taxes to cut those bootstraps off, don't be surprised when they say, I'm not going to accept this. And they think what they're living in is capitalism. It is not. What they're living in is in a world where government regulations and the $2 trillion deficits and the rest of the government spending determine what's going to be invested in, what you're going to buy you're going to buy an electric car. I don't want an electric car. Not your choice. You know, we're going to cut down your...
No, it's even worse than you're saying. Boomers destroyed capitalism, government, the church, academia, marriage, sex. Like, help me out here. What am I missing? Like, they literally destroyed all of these things.
Prosperity.
And then they don't even acknowledge the society that they handed off to the young people. And then on top of that, they're lecturing down with a set of values that they never even taught these kids to begin with. Like, we have questions like, would it be better or worse for the country to have more traditional marriages? And among the 18 to 29s, only 40% say better.
Wow.
And they're also the least likely to say it's important to be taught traditional Western values in school. And a whole bunch of them, I've really been riffing dark on this. Because, we had, I forget the numbers off the top of my head, but out of the 18 to 29s, something like 40% of them were still single.
Mm-hmm.
Of that, another roughly 40% were just like, I'm not even dating, I don't care.
Everybody a lot of not everybody, but a lot of the folks that I talk to in that 25 to 35 range are saying exactly that. They're saying, I can't find someone to marry because, our value systems are so divergent. And,
the women are peak feminists right now.
Oh, yeah.
They want a career.
The men can't even talk to them.
Right.
And I can't seem to get ahead of my career. I just got fired from my second job because they brought in another H-1B guy. It just goes on and on. So, we're gonna bring
single woman home ownership has increased like 10%. It's like doubled from 10 to 20% in the last 30 years too. Like every part of the spectrum, it's terrible.
It's just terrible. And so now we've got someone else joining us here in just a second. We're going to bring on Liz Harrington, who you may remember was a spokeswoman in one of the Trump campaigns, I think 16, is an independent journalist. We've had her on before, and she's been watching these races pretty closely too. So maybe just for a second, we're going to bring Liz on and say, hey, Liz, welcome back to the Conservative Voice on WWDB. Are you with us?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Great. Glad you're here. Now, you heard some of what we just went through with Mark. What are your observations? You've been watching this closely. I've been watching your social media. What are your observations?
Well, it's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot of really, I think, troubling things going on in the country right now. But, first and foremost, though, to me, we can't sort any of it out if we don't really know where we are as a country because our elections are so crooked. And that makes it's really, really difficult for me to be Monday morning quarterbacking elections in, say, Virginia when I don't trust any of those results.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the pundits have to go on and say, well, this is why our candidate, the Republican candidate, wasn't good enough. And this is why they didn't do this, they didn't do that. And it's like, well, wait a minute. None of these numbers make any sense. So let's start there. And there are serious problems with the culture, with like you were talking about, the boomers and the zoomers, just the divergence here and the different directions this country could go. But at the same time, I just think there's so much confusion too, because we're not sure what country we're living in right now, because we elect President Trump in a landslide against really all odds and all corruption and everything they threw at him, and cheating, which was rampant, which we saw down ballot. A lot of races were stolen in 2024. But at the same time, then we still have this system, and we're expecting different results. And it's not going to happen unless we get true, real accountability. So it's just very hard to solve these problems when you're looking at it from a lens of, well, where is the country even at? Because we see one thing and we know certain things to be true, and then they just keep cheating and keep stealing, and we can't get any change anyway. So it's,
Right.
we kind of throw up our hands a little bit, and it makes it hard, I feel, for probably a pollster, too, to even, judge what's going on as well, because people get so confused. They don't know where we are as a country right now. They just don't.
So now taking these two things that you've said and merging these two stories together, we had an outcome in 2024 that a lot of people thought was impossible. All the pollsters, almost all the pollsters,
Not all of them.
not all, said it was impossible.
Many.
Right? and the general feeling was, look, I'm going to go vote the way I'm going to vote, even though I don't expect to win, but I'm going to go lean into the fight because, I got to vote against this bizarre cabal that's destroying the country. And Donald Trump is providing, if he can deliver it, an agenda that'll really fit. So the turnout in 2024, and Mark, you hit this with the independents, the Democrats, the first-time voters, just like 16. The turnout, I think, overwhelmed the fraud, and they couldn't take Trump out. But then, Liz, you just hit, there were these down-ballot races that took weeks and weeks and weeks to determine, and suddenly the Republican winner in a House seat in California loses to a Democrat a week and a half after the election. See, I think we're fighting...
Found mail-in ballots, did they?
That's right. I think we're fighting two battles here. I think one battle, Mark, is the messaging and the delivery on the agenda that these people voted for and demand. The only agenda that can pull them away from this socialist agenda, the only one that can beat Mondami, is the Donald Trump America First agenda delivered. And then on the other hand, we still have to overwhelm the fraud unless Trump is able to fix this fraud somewhere between now and March. So
yeah, I'll try and tie it together. It is harder. So yes, we have cheating. I think we have many, many distributed and unique ways of cheating. Our polling alone, I think, proved that there was massive mail-in ballot fraud because 20% of mail-in voters in the battleground said they got more than one extra ballot. And then 28% of all mail-in ballot voters told us they committed at least one out of 4 types of fraud. So just there alone was enough to call all of the results into question.
Wait, and they admit that?
They admit
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I'll pass you the polling. Yeah, just DM me. But that was like 2 years ago we proved that or whatever. I mean, so it's like, and everybody hates the election system. They think it's hopelessly corrupt. But then, you probably have, people behind closed doors. You have the harvesting. You have, like, just all the things that we know.
Mm-hmm.
And yet also, I think in a national election, there's less scrutiny or more scrutiny, so they can only do certain things. And, I think the polling is pretty good, but polling has been getting harder, and it's harder to poll states.
Yep.
So that makes it tougher. But we definitely had a national signal that independents turned on Republicans, that everybody hated Congress, and that there was demoralization. And I had Jack down 6 points. I think if I had polled him again, I would have had him down 9.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think that means there's like 4 to 6 points of cheating in New Jersey somewhere, right? So I think we need to get at that. But the problem I'm saying is, like, the best chance we ever had to get anything done for that accountability has already been shot. Like, literally, Trump had the political capital to do whatever he wanted back in March, literally everything. He could have basically been Caesar and nobody would have cared. And now everybody's looking at him, and I don't think his approval rating's that bad, but it's complete demoralization on the right. People are starting to doubt him. People think that they've been completely betrayed by the Republican Party, and it's because there hasn't been accountability.
Does he know that?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I tweet it every day 50 times.
Is he following you?
So you could see that's built in, that fraud is built into the system, right? You could see that. And yet you've got, the ability to overcome it if things go really well. Bunny, you're here in Southeast Pennsylvania. what you're hearing from Liz, what you're hearing from Mark, how does that play in this battleground?
Well, it's interesting, and I'm in total agreement. Let's just bring it very local. Look at what happened, and we can be suspicious and say it was an accident in Chester County on Tuesday. What happened? They put out the polling books that were from the primary. All they had in them was Republicans and Democrats. So when an independent or a libertarian or anyone else showed up at the polling place, they couldn't vote. They had to vote provisionally. How and where were those votes taken? How were they counted? I mean, we could say it was an accident, a total incompetence on the part of voter services, and I think they are incompetent, by the way. But really, it's a bigger picture. I think there's so many areas and so many ways for fraud and for things to be manipulated. Somebody once said they aren't voting machines, they're voting computers. And with a computer, anything can happen. And we should stop calling them voting machines.
Mm-hmm.
They're not machines. They're computers.
They used to be machines. You pulled a lever, a mechanical lever.
That was a machine.
Mm-hmm.
That was a true vote. Now they're computers. What could happen with computers? Anything. Absolutely anything. Here or abroad or anywhere else. And what happened in Chester County on Tuesday was an embarrassment. And you can't tell me that that was just an accident. Maybe call me a conspiracy theorist, but...
Well, I, too, have a theory that there's a conspiracy.
Yeah. Oh,
So-
do you really?
Yes,
Join me.
turns
Thank
out
you.
I do,
Thank
yes.
you.
I mean, it might have been a mistake by
Okay.
somebody, but there's got to be some accountability.
But the thing is, in one of the most critical and not that complicated a process compared to, say, petrochemical, automotive, software development, right? In all these other industries, they have system controls in place that make these systems work well. This is by far not the most complex process
Where are the
America
checks and
runs.
balances?
So, and we have constant problems. And Liz, I think you pointed out some of the shocking sort of aberrations, statistical aberrations or anomalies that we saw in the system on Tuesday, like like the number of ballots that showed up, in New Jersey?
Yeah, I mean, just what I've been, seeing other people observe, but it's always just so blatantly obvious that, I mean, just on its face, you're like, okay, Mickey Sherrill, who? She breaks all records for a gubernatorial race in New Jersey and gets 500,000 more votes than the Democrat last time. It defies logic. It screams for investigation, and I love that point. Let's stop calling them machines. Call them the computers.
Great
And when
point.
the computers are breaking down in many areas, again, I have to get frustrated, too. I saw Emerald Robinson's monologue the Wednesday after the election, and it's just, you just kind of, cry out, like, why aren't we sending in the feds? Where's the show of force? That somebody's watching. You can't just get away with this again. 2020 all over again. And to me, that's what you see the parallels. You see it with this, Mickey Sherrill, so uninspiring, just like Biden, breaking all records, most votes in history. It's just absurd. And they're getting to the point where they're inflating the number of votes. And you've seen it in a lot of races where the Republican turns out and does all this hard work, and I'm sure there's probably some cheating there too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, absolving the Republicans, because there's clearly been a reason why they haven't gotten on board with auditing and changing our election system.
Right.
But still, I've seen it time and time again where the Republican does all this work. They do the ground game, they do the mail-ins, they do the early voting. They outperform where they were supposed to be, right? So you have this guy this is the third time he's ran in New Jersey, and he keeps outperforming and getting more votes than the previous cycle's winner. But the problem is the previous cycle's so-called winner is a Democrat, and they keep inflating their numbers astronomically, and now it's over 500,000. So he keeps getting like 200,000 more votes than the last time he ran before, but they keep getting 500,000 more votes, and that's just absurd.
Right.
It is so
It's in your
absurd on
face.
its face.
Very
and
much
it's
in your
face.
Yeah.
And I had, Miranda Devine quote tweeted, one of the tweets about this and said, numbers of results are not evidence of fraud. Well, nobody said it was, smoking gun this is, the prosecutorial evidence to arrest somebody, but it's in your face.
It's in your face.
Right.
That's why we need to go grab the machines. That's why we need to go in and do real investigations. They're still battling Fulton County after how many years? 5 years. They're still not letting us see the ballots from 2020 in Georgia. And they're thumbing their nose at some people at DOJ. Enough already. Yeah. Go in and seize those ballots. Expose the fraud that we all know happened. We have plenty of actual evidence, by the way, that you could use in court of how corrupt that election was. Expose it and get some real change because I keep hearing that things are happening. There's grand juries. There's going to be all these charges. That's all fine and good. But meanwhile, if you're sending your kids to school in Virginia, your schools are going to change.
Oh, they're going to
Your
change.
state is going to change. New Jersey, all of these things. People are still getting away with stealing elections, and that has real consequences, and we don't have time They will steal the midterms. They will clearly steal the midterms. That's the other.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm going long on this answer, but one other thing I want to mention real quick. Just obviously, and maybe Mark can speak to this, the Democrat Party has never been less popular. Everyone hates them, and yet they're going to turn around and say, blue wave, 15-point win in Virginia, all of this nonsense. It defies logic. The results are bogus, and they keep running with it, and they're going to pretend that there's a blue wave with a party that everyone hates.
Right.
With the media
will do
pushing it. The media is going to push
and
that,
that's the one
right?
thing. They'll push it, and that's why President Trump, though, in his brilliance, get rid of the filibuster now. Get these Republicans to actually do something to do the agenda and make them govern, and yet crickets. They don't want to do it. I predict they will cut a deal so fast with the Democrats now that President Trump is really railing this because it exposes them. If they got rid of the filibuster, they would actually have to pass something that was worth a damn.
That's right.
And they don't want to do it. They don't want to do it.
So the argument is we can't take action. You gave us the House, the Senate, and the White House, and the
Right.
White House, but we can't take action because there's a chance that the Democrats will give a long speech in the well of the Senate. And we can't. I mean, we'll have to sit up all night and watch them. They're going to read nursery
the last
rhymes.
long speech was Spartacus,
You know,
wasn't it?
Yes.
Spartacus?
Yes. They should. The Democrats should be giving. They should be giving filibuster speeches in the Senate every hour of every day. They should be pushed to fight on every front. They should be getting
Exactly.
exhausted. This idea that the Republicans can hide behind the filibuster as if that is the overarching thing that cancels the Constitution and all of your votes in 2024 and 2020 and 2016. It cancels everything you care about because we just don't have 60 votes. It's nonsense.
The Republicans lose the PR battle every single time, and you should expect it by now, right?
Yeah.
But at what point are people going to stand up and demand that the Republican Party do something? I mean, that's what
Right.
Trump did, right?
They
And
already
Trump,
did.
Exactly. They already did, and Trump was the guy, right? And at this point, the Democrats have seized that PR battle again, and it strains credulity that everything that happened in New York, New Jersey, Virginia, Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, every county where there was a contested election, except for one with, row office candidates like controller and treasurer and whatnot, every single county went blue. The Republicans didn't win one county except one, Cumberland. So at what point do people not say, that can't be right?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. How can that possibly be? At what point are people going to wake up?
Well,
I
Mark,
don't know.
what do you think, Mark? Have they?
Yeah, well, 2/3 of people already thought the 2020 election was fraudulent, so I don't think you're really going to get a much higher number than that. and yeah, and I'm really hopeful that there is something, hopefully, going on behind the scenes, because let's acknowledge that we're having kinetic action with the country that owns the company that is in ubiquitously voting machines in our battleground states, and that there's already been pledges to examine these and recertify these equipments. And I really do, like, thinking back to 2024, I've said this many times, recall a moment at the night where I thought, okay, well, they stopped the voting, they stopped the counting, they're going to try and steal it. And there was an hour there where there were no results coming in, and then all of a sudden they started coming back in, and that's when it got called for Donald Trump. So this whole whistleblower report that there was some interruption of servers in Serbia or whatever, I really think there might be something there, and
Yes.
I'm desperate for that information to get out. But that being said, I mean, again, I think that this comes back to this blow up of the fourth turning, where it's going to increasingly just be about, like, battling over scarcity, and the Democrats are going to raid the Treasury, because the youth really do want socialism now, and the harder that the olds preach about it, the less they're going to listen. And what the Republicans are doing now is just convincing everybody that they're the ultimate boomers. They're saying, no, we're not taking action for you young people, because we still believe in this old value set that's worked for us. And that's the problem. It's like, yes, they expose themselves when the president calls for them to use the nuclear option to come to the rescue of America. And they say, no, rules are more important. And the way they're doing it, in only having 9 votes, apparently, according to the Washington Examiner, and then literally bending over for the Democrats, it's just, Thune came out and said something to the effect of, we're willing to give them everything they want. I mean, I just can't. So they did this shutdown during the election and then folded, and then they're going to get back into office. Then instead of passing good laws, they're going to get back to reconciliation. And it's just going to be another 4,000-page bill that nobody knows what it does, and it's not a public opinion win. I think they need to think like accelerationists, and I hate to be that guy, but the Democrats already weaponized justice against a political opponent, trumped up charges, and tried to throw him into jail. And it looks like we're too busy dotting the I's and crossing the T's. I don't have a lot of hope that any of these people are going to get convicted anyways. So what I think they should do is literally just arrest one person a day. And if the courts throw it out, at least you can get the evidence out there. Like, we're going to be socialist. Like, that's the way the polling is going.
Yep.
And maybe it's not Mamdani, but it's going to be somebody else.
But Mamdani is a really important milestone. And, if you go to Minneapolis and you look at that, we talked about it before, the mayor there, who's not Somali, but actually delivered his acceptance speech in Somali. I mean, these are things that are making a lot of Americans very uncomfortable. And, Mark, I still think that it is, that coalition, I still think we're in a position where it's maybe 30% of the country, could now be 35 again, that are radical and cannot be accessed. We can't reach them. There's no messaging. You can't get near them. They're just, like the women you see on the internet who are doing these crazy speeches, right? They're called the awfuls typically, right? The affluent white female liberal.
Right.
And so I think it's 70% of the population that's reachable. It's not 50-50 in this country.
Yeah,
it's
100%.
70%.
They just want a sane society, but you're not going to be able to convince them to vote for you by saying we're the party of capitalism. That doesn't work anymore because they don't believe you. You failed.
Right. I don't even know what it is.
Right.
Really?
They don't. And we saw in this cycle here, again, in the southeast Pennsylvania area, we saw some really well-run campaigns with really good candidates and well-considered messaging that was targeted at what people really care about. It wasn't just what I want to talk about or what you want to, it was what they care about. And those races got blown out. I mean, so when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at a problem that ranges, again, from the National Republican Party into Congress and all the way down to the counties. And Trump gave us the answer, right? So Trump came out and said, listen, I have the overarching agenda that will solve the socialism risk. It's going to give these young kids something to work for. We're going to get rid of the H-1B visa thing that cuts off the bootstraps. We've got this agenda. Bunny, is there any chance we get even the Pennsylvania Republican Party to get behind the American agenda? Is that possible?
I'm looking at Felice. Both of us serve on the Republican State Committee.
Yeah.
That's a question that I cannot answer. And the only thing I could say is there have been a lot of people that have left as state committee people because they've been very, very discouraged. And unfortunately, the replacement of those who leave is done by those in power. Am I right,
Right.
Elise?
Yeah.
So the vacancies that are created by people who finally, maybe they are discouraged or they give up, are being replaced by those who are still marching to the same drummer.
Well, and they do as they're told.
That's what I mean, marching to
Yep.
the same drummer. Here's what you'll do, and here's the way you'll vote. And you and I both have been kind of rebels. I'm going to use the word rebel, not voting with the selected choice by the party. You're asking me a question I can't answer because I don't see anything happening at this point. And unless, Felice, you see something different, I don't see it. It's the same old thing.
Here's the problem. People haven't seen good things come from the PAGOP.
Right, we're not winning.
We haven't been winning. We haven't had good messaging. Like I said earlier, they chose this vote no on retention for judges as the main thing, rather than pushing, to Liz's point, reopen government with, by voting Republican. Okay, so maybe voting for the Republican judges in Pennsylvania isn't going to reopen the government, but goodness sakes, have some kind of a message other than vote no. Oh, that's just the party of obstruction, right? Like when you say it that way.
Which doesn't mean it wasn't an important issue. And what we're
was
talking about,
but it's not the issue.
But the voter was confused.
The voter was confused, and it's not emotional. You're not going to bring them in on this issue.
Right. They can't relate. They don't relate.
It's very tough. So I'll just give one more example that we touched on in the first hour. There's a gentleman who they picked to run, and by they I mean the 4 or 5 people that pick all the statewide candidates. They picked to run for a statewide judge role here in Pennsylvania that's somewhat unique, called the Commonwealth Court. And I don't remember his name, but he's a Commodore at a yacht club on Lake Erie, I heard. That's all I can remember. Now, we didn't see him at all during the campaign.
It's Matt Walford.
He had no resources. He had no message. He was a Department of Environmental Protection attorney who was running to be on a court that's supposed to rein in government's overreach. Now, then he said, well, I wasn't that for a long time. And then he said, well, yeah, I've been training their attorneys. I mean, it's just a terrible candidate. They had a really good candidate that the grassroots were behind, who was a fighter and could deliver a message. And the establishment, these 4 or 5 people that pick all the candidates, they hated him. So he was out, and there was no real primary choice. Now, there was a primary. But again, once you've picked the candidate and the whole party gets everybody and tells them you must vote for this candidate, they fall in line, like the Pied Piper.
Correct. And the other thing is the other candidate, who was a big Second Amendment guy and had a lot of grassroots support.
Yes.
I mean, gun owners, hunters. He had run before, too. Constitutionalist and a really squared away guy. He was not the choice. He was too outspoken. And instead, they went out and sought the candidate that you're referring to. They went out and recruited that candidate, an environmental lawyer. What does that tell you?
Yeah. I mean,
They're trying to play to the left.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about,
they lost.
And so Liz and Mark, what we're talking about on a national scale, we see at a statewide scale in Pennsylvania, and then we see it down in our counties with the way resources are used, and sometimes candidates are picked, and so there's no question. This thing you said earlier, Mark, about it has to be burned down and replaced, I think is absolutely true. There must be a war council right now inside the Republican community that says, what are we going to do to radically change immediately, because the midterms are not coming, they're here. To Liz, to your point, we've got to fix these elections. Mark, you delivered the numbers on the polling. Everybody knows. We've got 2 minutes, by the way, folks. Everybody knows these elections are broken. Not everybody, but 70% of the country, 66, whatever it is, they know. They've got to get behind this American agenda, and that means Congress. That means the party. They've got to get behind Trump. Stop trying to nitpick this guy and cut his legs out. Support him so he can get back on track. Now, he's got to get back on track.
Yeah.
An Ozempic event yesterday was a disaster.
Yeah.
Everybody's going, wait a minute, why is the government buying Ozempic for weight loss? What is it? And the guy falls over. The Ozempic guy falls over in the middle of the... Oh, my goodness. So he's got to get back on track, and Trump, the Republican Party, and Congress must deliver the American agenda. If you want to stop socialism, that's how you do it. Now, Mark and Liz, we've only got 1 minute left, and this has been great. I really appreciate your insights. But, Liz, maybe just a quick comment, and then, Mark, maybe you could close us out.
Well, I'll go quick. They need a shadow RNC. Over to you, Liz.
I think if the Senate is not going to go nuclear, Trump needs to go nuclear. He just needs to do it himself and start exposing all of these people and blow up this corrupt system. That's what needs to happen, because they're too unwilling to do the right thing and put the country over their own self-interest. He needs to really get to work on exposing all these frauds.
Thank you. And Liz, I think you're right. Liz and Mark, thank you so much. Bunny, thank you for coming in. It was great to have
Pleasure.
you here. And Felice, thanks for your insights. This has been a great discussion, and I appreciate all of your contributions.